The Vedas explain that the soul is covered by two kinds of bodies. One, the gross material body. Two, the subtle material body. The gross material body is the visible body that we feed and clean and dress and normally identify as ourselves. The subtle material body is an interface between the gross material body and the soul.
One of the great contributions of a text like the Bhagavad Gita and more largely schools of Sankhya and Yoga, and this would include Nyaya as well, is that there's three distinct things that they recognize. There is the gross physical world, and that would include the physical body. That's the visible physical body. This is something we call material. It's part of Prakriti, material nature. Its definition being that it's always in a state of transformation and flux. It's moving. They also recognize that part of the material nature is something we might call a subtle reality, a subtle dimension, or a subtle body, composed of what we call the mind. And this mind has different components to it. And the third thing that they recognize, and I do believe this is not something that's widely discussed in Western philosophy and theology, and therefore not discussed in Western science, is that they recognize consciousness as entirely separate from that. So you've got a gross physical body, the visible body. You've got the more subjective component of the mind, and then you've got a third thing called consciousness, or the Atman, or the Purusha. And the first two are entirely material. They are not considered to be part of the soul or the self at all. The soul is completely separable from both the mind and the body, and it can exist independently of them. What exactly it is when it's independent of the body and mind is a big question, but it has that capacity at least. And this way of sort of looking at the world, I think it has great implications for the way that, say, Darwinian evolution is understood, or neuroscience is understood, and more largely psychology in general. It's a very interesting and powerful idea.
The Vedas say that the subtle body has three parts. One, the mind, a repository of past experiences. Two, the intelligence, that part of our intellectual self, responsible for making decisions on the basis of gain and loss. And three, the false ego, which is our sense of being the body and not the soul. The subtle body, like the gross body, is material and temporary. The subtle body is the medium through which the soul interacts with the gross body and the world outside. The soul is conscious, whereas the subtle body, being material, is not. The subtle body is just another filter through which consciousness, the soul, interacts with the world. And that filter is quite refined. The subtle body, just like the gross body, has senses, subtle senses. The gross body has, for example, 2 eyes, a physical mechanism through which it picks up visual information. The subtle body also has subtle eyes, through which it also picks up visual information. Just as the gross body has ears, the subtle body has subtle ears. Just as the gross body has a nose, the subtle body has a subtle nose, and so on. To help us better understand the relationship between the gross body, the subtle body, and the soul, the Vedic library provides an intriguing metaphor found in the Katha Upanishad 1.3.3-4. The soul is the passenger in the chariot of the material body, and intelligence is the charioteer. The mind is the reins, and the senses are the horses. The self is thus the enjoyer or sufferer in the association of the mind and senses. So it is understood by great thinkers. This metaphor also illustrates how the subtle body serves as a link between the gross body and the soul. Just as the passenger on a chariot gets where he wants to go by telling the charioteer, who then controls the horses, the soul controls the body by directing the subtle body to take control of the senses.